see a number of new faces around the table today and on the screen, so that's great. Welcome to meeting number 108 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. All witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. I'd like to remind all members of the following points. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. All comments should be addressed through the chair. Members, please raise your hand if you wish to speak, whether participating in person or via Zoom. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. Thank you all for your cooperation. Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3I and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September 17, 2024, the committee resumes its study of the mission, mandate, role, structure, and financing of the new Capstone Research Funding Organization announced in Budget 2024. It's now my pleasure to welcome from Northwestern Polytechnic, Dr. Vanessa Shane, President and Chief Executive Officer, and from Polytechnics Canada, Sarah Watts-Renard, Chief Executive Officer, and from Université du Québec, Christian Ababole, Vice President, Research Creation and Diffusion by video conference. Up to 5 minutes will be given for opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions. Dr. Shane, I invite you to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. It's a privilege to be before you today as we gather to discuss the Capstone Organization. As we navigate an era marked by rapid advancements and unprecedented challenges, the role of applied research in polytechnic institutions has never been more vital. As the largest post-secondary in Northern Alberta, Northwestern Polytechnic recognizes the importance and value of applied research. Our institution works directly with small and medium-sized enterprises to address real-world challenges through applied research. When industries and communities collaborate with polytechnics, they create impactful and tangible results. The partnerships I'm speaking to today leverage both academic and industry expertise and resources, allowing for the development of practical solutions that can be swiftly implemented in the community, the marketplace, and beyond. Applied research plays a vital role in addressing the unique challenges faced by rural communities. By focusing on practical and local solutions for our industries, it helps improve quality of life, foster economic development, and enhance access to essential services. In Northern Alberta, our main industry partners are from the energy, agriculture, forestry, and healthcare sectors. In agriculture innovations, applied research helps to develop sustainable farming practices, improve crop yields, and integrate technology to support local farmers. Applied research fosters economic development by exploring strategies for diversifying local economies, supporting small businesses, and creating job opportunities tailored to the community's strengths. Currently, without Capstone, the national research ecosystem is organized around academic disciplines of social sciences and humanities, natural sciences and engineering, and health sciences. The tri-agency's role and functions are to promote and assist post-secondary research in these areas. The committee has already heard that only 2.9% of current research funding is awarded to colleges and polytechnics. Also, the majority of investments in applied research is in institutions situated in major urban centres. This oversight is problematic because it discounts the value and strength of the collaborations that are occurring beyond the borders of major cities and in the heart of some of our most lucrative industries. It also means that a vital perspective has been left out of the national research ecosystem. To that end, the missing components are representation, transdisciplinary, and equality. And this is where Capstone Organization has a fit. The Capstone mandate needs to support mission-driven research that helps to address the urgent societal challenges where the intellectual property belongs to Canadians, not to the individual researcher or the specific post-secondary institution. This is publicly funded research for the benefit of all Canadians. Capstone's role should be twofold. First, focused on transdisciplinary research of a complex challenge that brings together knowledge from academia, experiences from those working within the challenges, and the prospective benefits to Canadians. Second, Capstone's role should be focused on the integration of the Canadian innovation ecosystem where all post-secondary institutions collaborate and contribute to the research enterprise. Not only does Capstone's structure need to be representative of all post-secondary institutions, including polytechnics, colleges, and CEGEPs, it also must intentionally include rural and northern researchers, industries, and communities. Capstone should be funded through a new funding envelope. A dedicated and stable investment will allow applied research to flourish. In closing, I want to share information with the committee about Technology Access Centers, or TACs, as an example of how Capstone's approach can support mission-driven research on a larger scale nationally. So a TAC is an advanced applied research and innovation facility. It enables companies to access state-of-the-art technology, equipment, and multidisciplinary team of experts who will help transform innovative ideas into market-ready products through prototype development, process scaling, and addressing specific business challenges. Northwestern Polytechnic's TAC, the National Bee Diagnostic Center, is a leader in providing comprehensive diagnostic services and cutting-edge testing for the beekeeping industry, with aligned processes and practices to accredited laboratories in the EU and the US. And it works to advance testing for fraudulent honey to protect the reputation of Canadian honey worldwide. The other TACs across the country support and benefit SMEs and communities in similar ways through innovation, technology, commercialization, and employability. I encourage Capstone to leverage its mandate and role in a way that will not only build on the success of these TACs, but also amplify the strengths of our collective learnings on a collaborative research community. Thank you very much, and I await your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sheehan. We'll now turn to just see who's next on my list here. Ms. Watts-Reinhardt, the floor is yours for 5 minutes of an opening statement.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm delighted to return to the committee to participate in your study on the new Capstone Research Organization. It will come as no surprise that Canada struggles with innovation and productivity. Though we make considerable investments in research, the country often fails to translate those findings into economic and social impact. The nature of R&D spending does little to contribute solutions to the pragmatic challenges that we face as a country. I believe the Capstone Research Funding Organization has real potential to address this shortcoming. There is an opportunity to better map and exploit Canada's rich research ecosystem, better addressing topics of national interest, from housing to elder care to climate change. For example, discovery research related to artificial intelligence requires implementation pathways for Main Street businesses and organizations in every corner of the country. I'm seeing this happen with little fanfare and modest investments at Canada's polytechnics in areas from mining operations to wildfire suppression. And this is why I was disappointed by the What We Heard report issued by the Tri-Councils following a very brief consultation with the research community. In my view, the report focuses more on retaining the status quo than it does on establishing a framework for something new and impactful. And I know there are many researchers who wait their entire careers to secure funding to explore their passions for science, engineering, health discoveries, and social sciences, and that is commendable. Yet, if the new research organization has the ambition to be something different or something more than is currently funded by the tri-agencies, frankly, it will be a waste of time and money if it does not achieve that. And for this reason, I again tell the story of commercialization-focused research of the type underway at Canada's polytechnics. Over the years, in our meetings with government stakeholders, we've often been asked to quantify the return on investment of applied research, including jobs created, export markets developed, and new products launched. And as you might expect, these are questions that are rarely asked of university researchers. In response, Polytechnics Canada recently published a report on the economic impact of applied research. This was a year-long study that was funded entirely by my organization, which receives no government support. It shows that every dollar invested in Polytechnic applied research generates a return on investment between $8 and $18. The analysis found that polytechnics de-risk R&D for business, making innovation accessible. Adopting new technology or implementing new systems can be like betting the store for small and medium-sized business owners. And Polytechnic applied research puts innovation within reach. Data from the past 3 years shows that what polytechnics have been able to do is attract matching dollars for every dollar invested by the federal government. Projects not only respond to the challenges defined by an industry partner, but the partner retains intellectual property from the collaboration, enabling them to commercialize products without being hostage to shared IP. And the report doesn't stop there. It includes more than 30 case studies of pragmatic, impactful research partnerships that resulted in business growth and created jobs. The projects illustrate the interdisciplinary nature of challenge-driven research, drawing expertise from various parts of the institution and beyond. In addition to partner insights, we heard from some of the 28,000 Polytechnic students who participate in applied research collaborations each year. And I believe that is a really useful blueprint for the Capstone Research Funding Organization. Challenge-driven collaborations, operating at the speed of business with partners who are looking to solve real challenges and commercialize the results. A focus on impact and results in areas of importance to Canadians. Smart people who are making good choices for Canada's future prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Watts-Reinert. And now we'll turn to Christian Agbabli. Sorry, I probably really made a mess of your name, but anyway, you have the floor for your opening statement of 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members. I want to thank you for inviting me to represent the Université du Québec to this meeting. My name is Christian Boubli, and I am Vice President, Research, Creation, and Diffusion as one of the agencies at Université du Québec. My remarks today will make 4 recommendations: governance, funding for the new Capstone organization. And this will deal with something that is very necessary for the success of this reform. For it to be meaningful, it has to be an improvement on the existing system for support in Canada. 4 points: support, harmonize, make it more representative of the ecosystem in research. Strategic research has to be foremost, and also promote support for Francophone research. It is very important, firstly, that this new organization should contribute to a simplification of what already exists. On a sectoral basis, there should be a harmonization of the existing programs and to provide uniformity and agility, nimbleness for the Canadian research industry. It has to use uniform tools that will be integrated into the actual research done, and to promote enlightened decisions in the context of research. There has to be a consultation mechanism that would be led by the Capstone organization and which would reflect the diversity of Canadian universities. This would explicitly consist of support for the development of research in regions and other universities in Canada. The creation of the new organization is a very unique opportunity to create balance in the research world. It is important for there to be representative working groups that represents the research done across the country. And we would like now to insist on a proportional funding for the various research undertakings. You cannot take from Peter to pay Paul. So the way the system works actually and currently is that when something is announced, the funding has to be set aside. But in the budget of 2024, this new capstone would be able to balance the research as a cornerstone of Canadian research. The capstone should be able to pilot the national research undertaking, establish a political strategy that should take into geography and the way in which the Canadian system supports research. There are values that are most important. First of all, access to funding and an evaluation process, freedom of research, cooperation amongst researchers, and a common use of and exchange of methods of research. That should be built on a foundation of efficient and tools that would be used by the research industry itself. And also, finally, the quality of support for research in Canada should contribute to more research being done in French. This is a concern for Quebec and also for Francophones outside of Quebec. In Quebec, we're very happy to have the creation of French entities that were created by the Quebec government to support research in French. That being said, the capstone can certainly play a role in the ecosystem of French research. It is important that the applications for funding that are submitted in French should be treated equally in terms of other applications for research funding across Canada. And that is something that has to be taken into account and seen in the context of the Official Languages Act, which offers equal equality for both official languages of this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agapogli. So I'm now going to open the floor to questions from members. Please be sure to indicate to whom your questions are directed. So our first questioner will be MP Tucker for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. With the testimony we heard so far, we heard from our Quebec friend talk about importance to be very strategic in how we spend dollars, from our friends from Alberta and the college associations. It was important to look at applied research and look at some of the research that can be done that answers the questions to, common questions or concerns or problems that normal Canadians face. And that's very encouraging as we go on the study about capstone, how to direct research dollars into hopefully the most critical, mission-critical areas of questions that Canadians have. And then there's what's been going on. And I got a couple studies I'd like to get, I'll read it into the record, and then if anyone has any questions on it or wants to comment on it, they can jump in. If not, I'd like to hear at the end of the questions maybe some examples of what research is being done that is going to be useful. So in Carleton, we've, as taxpayers, paid $50,000 for playing for pleasure, the effective experience of sexual and erotic video games. So that's in Carleton for $50,000 that we've spent money on. Anyone would like to touch that one? Another one would be from University of Guelph, revisioning yoga bodies, expanding modes of embodiment with non-normative bodies. That's the University of Guelph for $90,000 that the Canadian taxpayer spent to study the revisioning yoga and yoga bodies. And this is from an area of the country, ripped from the Guelph Today newspaper, residents alarmed at possible encampments in Preservation Park. And that was from the 17th of October of this year. So we have housing hell out there. People are setting up tents in Guelph. Meanwhile, the government of Canada is spending taxpayers' dollars to a tune of $90,000 on revisioning yoga and yoga bodies. Any of our witnesses would like to take a stab at defending that? And if not, I would understand. I got two more studies I'll read in the record, then we'll get into some other questions. University of Alberta for $17,000. Analysts a representative of women in BioWare games and fan reactions through time. So this is the best source of dollars to be spent on research at the University of Alberta for $17,000. The analysts a representation of women in BioWare games and fan reaction through time. And where this relates to what's going on in Canada, like from earlier this month on CTV News, the title was of the story, Bullet Found in Wall of Edmonton School After Halloween Shooting. And this is, we've seen crime rates across Canada skyrocketing. And crime is out of control, and we're spending $17,000 on that research. And it doesn't stop there. And maybe our new friend from Quebec would like to comment on this one at Concordia University in Quebec. For $46,227, class and video games. This is what they're seized with in research in Montreal. Meanwhile, the Gazette, the largest paper in Montreal, article ran on October 27th to 24, Montreal unhoused encampments of the issues across Canada. And this is true. It's across Canada. This is a whole bunch of studies that taxpayers paid for that has very little, if we go back to the testimony from all the three of you, wanting it to be strategic, to applied research that goes into the most critical questions that are asking Canadians. And this is what we're funding. And I just got to hear, hopefully from our witnesses today, that this isn't the case. That this is, that there is hopefully some really good research that is going on at your respected institutions and members' institutions, because I think taxpayers are kind of getting sick of this. And I got two questions for you guys on this. Is if your students were receiving this level of funding, what sorts of projects would you expect them to carry out? So if you had a $50,000 prize dropped into your lap, what would be a typical or a example of research that might be done at a polytechnic right now that would hopefully answer some of those questions that Canadians have? Sure.
I can speak to that piece. So at Northwestern Polytechnic, two that I'll speak about. The first one is a COIL project, or collaborative online international learning, and this is for the healthcare sector, healthcare students. And particularly, we're looking at it from a rural healthcare access. And so what it is just that it's collaborative, it's online, and it's international. So global simulation development to enhance learning, provide learning opportunities for where these healthcare workers are working. And so it is simulation, training, sonography, and Indigenous cultural awareness. So healthcare workers working in rural do not have to try and go somewhere to learn this. They can learn it right in where they're practicing. And then our students are getting access to, so right from their education program, they can learn this while they're doing it and graduate with these skills already.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for renewing hope that there's some research being done out there that is going to hopefully help Canadians. Thank you.
MP Callaway for 6 minutes, please.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here, witnesses. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to try to get around the horn, as they say, in terms of my questions, but I want to start with Ms. Watts Renard. I particularly like your view that applied research can be the toolbox of improving the country's economy. I think that's really important. So I come from basically a polytechnic background as well. I worked at the Nova Scotia Community College for 11 years, worked at Cape Breton University, which has many aspects of applied research attached to it. So I see where you're going with that. And your opening remarks, you talked about some of the recommendations to get us to a better place. When I was in the post-secondary world, in particular in NSCC, there was often, I felt, a bit of stereotyping of applied research and the importance of it. And I'm wondering, when you talk about a capstone project, do you fear of that stereotyping in terms of applied research? Because I totally agree with each of the panelists that applied research to me is a gem, but we need to invest in it. And we need to have maybe slightly different criteria for it. So I wonder if you could speak to that and unpack some of the recommendations, and then I have another question or two for the other panelists.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much. It starts with less than 3% of the federal investment in research is currently going to applied research. So, I think that to your point, the investment needs to be there in order for us to really be able to push this out. The one thing I will say is, when I look at the examples of the kinds of research happening on our campuses, I'm seeing interdisciplinary, I'm seeing business-driven, I'm seeing, looking at Canada's big challenges and how to make small steps towards the solutions. So, as an example, at Saskatchewan Polytechnic, they are helping a Titan Clean Energy Products manufacture urban waste wood into plastics, and then creating those plastics from wood reduces GHG emissions by more than 90%. I don't see how this is not good for the company. This is not good for Canada, and that's the kind of research that is happening on the ground. It's not one thing. It doesn't require one researcher with one. In one discipline. It brings in students, it's bringing in companies, it's bringing in instructors, and that's what I see when I look across the college sector, and something I'd like to see more of.
And what I heard from the testimony from, I think, Ms. Shane, is it Shane? Shane? I want to make sure I get it correctly. What your last name?
Shane.
Okay, sorry. You talked about what particularly interested me in your opening remarks when you were talking about rural communities. And I think when, polytechnics can be found in major cities, but a lot of what you call polytechnic, I would call back home the community college. But in Nova Scotia, for example, there are 13 campuses, and they're spread outside of Halifax. There's a couple of campuses there, but it's really innovations happening there. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, when we're looking at this capstone, how do we ensure that polytechnics have the ability to access funding that I think there's a stereotype, once again, that in rural communities, there's just there are base kind of industries, like in my area, fishing and farming, which is so important. But there's also so much within that and so much outside of that I think the rest of Canada doesn't know. Could you speak to that?
Sure, yeah, thanks. The example I'll give is we have the National Bee Diagnostic Center. When people think of northwestern Alberta, they don't often think of bees. They may think of agriculture. And so we've worked with industry and have found that bee health, bee diagnostics is a need of the agriculture sector and farmers in the region. And so that's a real life example of where we've worked with industry to find their problems and then have put in research and have have helped come up with solutions that increase crop yields. In terms of representation, to your question of how we do that, I think the capstone needs to be very intentional, that all post-secondaries are represented, industries represented, communities are represented, and across rural, urban, provincial boundaries, and the post-secondary institutions. So it's not university-centric. It's got polytechnics, colleges, and CEGEPs represented as well.
Thank you. 33 seconds. Nerd and Shane, Ms. Shane, 3 recommendations that you want to see come when you open the report, and I'll limit it to 3. What would be the 3 that you both want to see?
If I can be first, I would say I think the person leading Capstone needs to truly understand applied research.
Okay.
I'd really like to see this multidisciplinary, mission-driven. I think that that's really got to be the focus, and that means something different from what currently exists within the tri-councils.
And the gentleman, sorry, the gentleman on the witness on the screen, please.
Oui, alors je vous dirais.
Yes, I'd say the importance is to be concerned about reflecting on the contribution and the advancement of knowledge. Capstone is very important. It can play a major role in the assessment process that is worldwide recognized.
Okay, so now turn to MP Blanchard-Joca for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Les témoins qui sont avec nous pour cette première.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to my questions. First of all, Mr. Bobley, my question is for you. I'd like to hear you say a bit more about the 4 recommendations. You spoke about representativity. Representation is very important. How do you see that for the members in the Capstone organization? Well, it has to be done at different levels. First of all, looking at regions and cities, because that has to reflect the overall research in the country. And also, I spoke about the issue of French language. We have to be sure that French plays a significant role, an important role in Capstone, so that research will be recognized, research that is done in French. And in terms of balance, we think of funding. What is important here is that it is a very important issue. In 2021, there 77% of the research done in Canada, but there also was a great deal of difference in terms of the student population that did that. So, Mr. Bobby, you talk about the federal system in research. There was a committee. Committees also include major universities and small committees. But in your area, there were universities and smaller agencies that were completely excluded. Do you think it would be a good thing or not to set aside or include universities that have different types of research that is ongoing? Yes, we can play a major role, as can Francophone Canadian universities, to be better represented in the research ecosystem overall. We are certainly very pleased with the new Capstone Committee and also the Advisory Committee, but I do think that we have to go further in terms of official languages. We want to have a network where the quality of French language research is better recognized and better funded. And therefore, Capstone can play this major role in terms of regional universities. The various networks that exist in Quebec, Rimouski, Témiscamingue, Ouachatibi, all of these smaller entities in Quebec. Mr. Bobby, you talked about the creation of and congratulated the government on its creation of an advisory committee. I look at the advisory committee, but there is what is absent is the university system in Quebec. It has a huge network. Quebec has a huge network of universities and smaller entities, and yet it is absent. What can you say about this exclusion of this major network, this francophone network? The Université de Québec is very concerned about the decline of French in Canada, and this decline is quite pronounced in the area of scientific research. We want to carry on. We want to meet with you. We want to exchange and have conversations with you so that you can better understand the development of what we are doing. We do hope that we will be able to have our voice heard through representatives that are present at this moment. Research in French, and I repeat, the network that exists, the Réseau de l'Université de Québec in Montreal itself, it goes from east to west, and we have 100,000 students, and we have quite a high number of professors, of instructors, a vast network. Do you wish to be part of this committee of experts? You referred to some figures, but I find it hard to believe that the largest network of universities in Quebec, that there is nobody there on this advisory committee to represent that network. What do you have to say about that? Yes, we would like to be heard by the expert committee to explain our position, to promote our interests in our network of universities, and to demonstrate what the Université de Québec can do. So I hope I've been clear in my answer. Yes, you have been very clear. You talked about promoting science in French. What can be done then by Capstone to do just that? Well, and first of all, thank you, Madam Chair. Our agreements are somewhat different, but we want to be able to have support of the scholarly publications in French have to be supported. And in the area of natural science and engineering, there are almost no publications that include the results of research in French. So 95% of what is done in these scholarly...
Our time, perhaps you can continue that in your next round, MP Blanchard-Jocard, to let him finish. That would be great. So MP Blaney, you now have the floor for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you so much, Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for your testimony here today. If I could come first to Ms. Sheen and Ms. Watts-Renard, I just really appreciated your testimony earlier, and I represent a rural and remote area as well, and I know that pragmatic solutions are often really key, because when you have less resources, you have to be very smart about how you collaborate and work together. So I really appreciate your testimony. I guess my first question is your response to the Capstone Research Organization consultation. You hold up the European Universities Initiative as an example of challenge and/or expertise-driven collaboration in a networked research. What is particularly important about this, and what do you think Canada needs to learn from it?
Yeah, I think that what we were trying to really point out is that the interdisciplinary research is something that is not necessarily investigator-led. It's something that there's a topic, a shared topic of national interest, and then being able to bring together researchers from various parts of the academic sector to be able to address that. And one of the things that we see in the European universities are these connections between research expertise that is connected, it is not necessarily the same, and able to come at a problem from various angles and to be able to benefit from that. It's something I see when I look at the network of my members across the country, that there's a desire to work in around artificial intelligence, for example. It's not a theoretical opportunity. The opportunity is, let's take something that we know about and try and apply that to real problems. And that would be done in different ways by different institutions. That's an opportunity to think about implementation. What does that look like for small businesses? What does that look like for the agricultural sector or the mining sector or elder care, for example? And so I think that it's that idea of trying to get networks of experts together to solve big challenges rather than standalone projects that are focused around one researcher's research idea.
Well, thank you for that. And I know from a long history of living in rural communities that often rural and remote communities have the boom and bust. It's always up and down, and that's very stressful on the communities and frustrating because a lot of money during the boom is made in the communities and it leaves the communities to sort of subsidize other parts of Canada. And then when it's the bust time, often the resources aren't there to help us move through it. So I'm just wondering, in the work that you're demonstrating in terms of economic development and working with different industries to find solutions that make sense within the area, what kind of investment or support would be more beneficial to actually see that expand so that we can see a diversification of the economy? And just to add another thought to that, one of the things that I've heard a lot of researchers tell me is that in Canada we do a lot of great work at the beginning, but we don't take the next step. And often other countries take our research, do the next steps, and then they become the specialists who can create opportunities to make money in their own country, and we're buying what we started in the first place. So I'm just wondering if any of that makes sense and if you see opportunities where funding might actually result in that.
Certainly I think that one of the things that we see is the billions of dollars that get spent in the research community, and I'm not suggesting that work is not important. What I'm suggesting is we have really not spent a lot of time and resources in how we take that knowledge and then provide the tools to businesses to use that information, to commercialize it, to turn it into products and services and support across the country. So I would certainly like to see us go from under 3% of funding to at least 10% of research funding. And my recommendation around the Capstone Research Funding Organization is don't try and do what it is that the Tri-Councils are already doing. Try something new and different, and that is going to require bringing different players to the table and being able to take apart the system as it works now and start thinking about how we can bring all of the strengths of the investigator-led research and make it really pragmatic. I think that's where polytechnics and colleges are extremely strong, and I think that we have really just underplayed their role.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Ms. Shane?
Sure. What I will add is that, as a publicly funded post-secondary institution, it's not our place to say what the directive research topic study is. We look to industry and we have them come to us with the challenge, and then we provide our expertise in terms of equipment, technology, the academic rigor, the evaluation methods, and then the translation of the results into practice. And that's really where polytechnics have that strength. So we're not setting the research agenda, but we are using our skills to support industry and communities on what they need, and we can do that through a rigorous research approach.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll cede the last 10 seconds.
Okay, so we'll now turn to our second round of questions. We'll start with MP Kitchen for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, all three of you, for your presentation here today and attending with us. Ultimately, we're talking about Capstone, okay, and that's what the discussion is about an agency that's being created to deal with the Tri-Council, which are the research funding. And the challenge that we have is that there's a perception, I think, from the witnesses we've heard, is that Capstone is going to have a whole bunch more money to give out to people because researchers come for money. That's what they need. Having been one in the past, you need that to survive. And it's so great to hear from all of you, and in particular when we talk about the polytechniques, et cetera, all across the country who do tremendous work, and in particular what I believe is more with businesses and that trickle-down effect that goes to communities and gets the research that is dealing with things like boots on the ground. The Southeast College in my hometown, where Tanya Andrus, who's the educational director for innovation and applied research, is looking at things such as carbon capture, which are great research projects. But as we heard from my colleague, our concern is you've got all these research projects, they're not touching things like that are so important. And that the challenge that we have is how do we ensure that the colleges are getting that, and because when you talk about 2.9% of the funding only goes to the colleges, I agree. I think if that's where we're going to look at. But the job should be being done by the Tri-Council. They should be accountable for where that funding is going. And how do we, rather than creating a whole new bureaucracy, get to the Tri-Council to get them to actually do that part that the Capstone is being proposed to do? Ms. Watts-Reynard, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that when I think about this, I think the Tri-Councils are disciplinary in nature. And so what they do is they fund researchers in those areas of discipline. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as something that is falling out of that research is then somebody somewhere is thinking, okay, so how are we going to use this? How are we going to make that pragmatic? I would argue that's what polytechnics and colleges are already doing. And I would like to see if there is going to be the creation of this, as you say, this additional bureaucracy, that bureaucracy is tasked with how can we make the research that is falling out of the Tri-Councils, how can we make that pragmatic? How can we apply that knowledge to real problems across the country? And I would suggest if it doesn't do that, then it really is a waste of time and money.
And I appreciate that because I see it as a waste of time because that's what's going to happen as a bureaucracy. But what I'm hearing from you is perhaps we should be maybe saying, okay, let's take that money and create a fourth body of the Tri-Council that deals with aspects of looking at institutions that are providing the research that is going to be doing work on the ground with the local businesses, et cetera. Is that correct?
No, I mean, really what I would like to see is an umbrella organization that is making more of a pointed direction to the Tri-Council, saying here are the big challenges we have in the country. And we would like to see some of the work that is being done, funding that is, exists within the Tri-Councils, is being earmarked to interdisciplinary research that is related to Canada's big challenges. And I actually don't think it's a great idea to keep throwing more money at another agency to do yet another bureaucracy. I'd actually prefer to see a real effort to make that more effective.
So what I'm hearing from you is you're saying the government needs to do its job to tell the Tri-Councils to do their job.
That is what I am saying.
How much time do I have? 35 seconds. Thank you. Dr. Sheen, I mean, your comments on when we look at oil and agriculture and those aspects of things, I think it's great to hear. And as I mentioned, the Southeast College in my community in Saskatchewan, those are things that I think are great. And how do we expand upon that? How do we get that attention to the Tri-Council, say this is research funding that we should be putting money towards? How do we make it such that if we're going to talk about equity diverse, why is this not part of equity diversity?
Yeah, my simple, straight-up answer is all funding opportunities need to be available to all post-secondary institutions. There are many that colleges and polytechnics are not eligible to apply for because we're colleges and polytechnics. So to open it up and make those opportunities available for funding, they all need to be available for every post-secondary institution to apply for.
Okay, thank you. We'll now turn to MP Chen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My question is to Ms. Watts-Reinert. You mentioned the report that your organization did on the economic impacts of applied research at Canada's polytechnics, and you shared with us a number that I thought was quite interesting, and I'd like to highlight it again, is that you said that $1 invested in applied research generates a return on investment of $8 to $18, and that to me is tremendous, and people need to know about that. I suspect that when you measure return on investment, it's easier to measure and include economic impacts because you need to quantify a dollar amount. Are there other impacts that perhaps are not measured, social impacts that would actually mean that there are other greater returns on investment to this research that cannot be quantified?
There are definitely impacts that can't be quantified, and part of our methodology was really to be able to think about everything that could be quantified and all of the social impacts that maybe couldn't be. The reason for the range is that obviously there's all kinds of different research that is going on. Social impact research, when you think about things like noise reduction, GHG emissions being reduced, when you start thinking about those things, those have not just an impact on the business whose project is underway, but also on society. And those are some things that are very difficult to quantify, which is the reason for the range. So, the researchers that did this work for us, the economists that did the research for us, said that's what lends them to feeling as though that upper boundary makes a lot more sense, is when you start thinking about all of the social impacts of research that are very difficult, to your point, to quantify in dollar terms.
Thank you. You also spoke today about adopting new technologies for SMEs. My riding of Scarborough North is incredibly diverse. We have a population of over 70% that are people born outside of the country. And Canada, as we all know, is a country that is built up on immigration. And people come here with hopes and dreams of having a better life, creating economic opportunities for their future generations. So in terms of a lot of the small businesses, which are the bedrock of Canada's economy, and those particularly of diverse communities where there might be a language barrier or lack of understanding of how things are done in Canada. You talked about some of the great successes that can occur when there is collaboration in applied research, where your partners are SMEs and you are able to measure how the work that is being done in applied research can translate to innovation and technology and adoption at small and medium-sized businesses. Is there a role to play in being able to reach out to more diverse communities? How can polytechnics be supported in doing that so that we can uplift all communities and make sure that the economy is inclusive and works for everybody?
This is a good question. The current funding allows for actually a fairly narrow focus a company has to come and say, this is my challenge, this is my problem, I'd like to adopt this new technology, and that's the work that's being done. I think if we were valuing that to the extent that it should be valued in the Canadian economy, we would spend more time asking the researchers, asking the students, asking the institutions, and Dr. Sheen brought up this technology access centers and saying, please go out and diffuse the knowledge that you have found in these projects. It's not a matter of sharing the IP. It's a matter of what did we learn about the adoption of this technology in your business and who else in the community would benefit from that. But realistically, the funding is much more directed than that, and very, very small amounts, which means the focus is on the business that knocks on the door. So I'm worried about the businesses that don't come knocking at the door, don't realize that this support is available to them, and I think that's a huge missed opportunity for Canada.
So if I'm here,
So now, MP Blanchard-Chocard, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je poursuis.
Thank you. Mr. Oboblier, you spoke about a balance in the distribution of research funding. That is that 80% of that funding is concentrated in the 15 large universities in Canada, the majority of which are Anglophone universities. You represent the largest Francophone network in Canada. You're well placed to speak to this. The federal government has said, and there was a press release from the government for the creation of scientific research funding. That report said we value French language research. The second was we also value post-secondary research in French in Canada. In Quebec, there is an underfunding of Francophone universities, really, relatively speaking, and therefore that leads to the decline of French in Canada in terms of the teaching body. So would you agree with what I have just said to you? Well, thank you. The Réseau de l'Université du Québec is the largest university network in this country, whether it is in French or in English. And therefore, that network could play a major role. But to do so, you have to rebalance the funding that is offered for French language research. We feel that this imbalance in terms of funding should be changed, and we want our voice to be heard to ensure that this comes about. That, therefore, requires a permanent consultative mechanism that would be involved with the universities and particularly the university network in Quebec. There would be a regional force. There would be an urban strength as well, if you like. Let me give you a few examples. Prevention of forest fires. In Canada, we have many forest fires. They are increasing, but the Université du Québec is funding research on that matter, and it requires more. We have an inter-university network that deals with risk. There should be funding for the French language research that deals with this matter.
Appreciate that. So for our final questioner of this round in this panel, it will be MP Blaney for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair. And through the Chair, if I could ask Ms. Watts-Renard a question. In your response, you also wrote, industry engagement in research collaboration should be an important goal of the new Capstone Research Organization, driving input from those positioned to inform the problem statement and implement solutions. So I'm just wondering, could you share with us what role you see industry playing in the management of Capstone and what of other sectors of our society, things like labor, youth, Indigenous communities?
You know, in order to undertake any kind of interdisciplinary research and to have a fulsome opportunity to address those things, you need to have the diversity of people at the table. And so it does concern me that the possibility that Capstone would be run by the people who are currently running the tri-councils and not have that breadth of input. And that will require youth and labor and industry to be at the table. I'd almost recommend that there were limited researchers that were at that table and instead focus on what are the big challenges that we're faced with, to define what those challenges are, and then to turn that over to whether it's the management of a Capstone Research Funding Organization or the Tri-Councils and say, you know, so what can we put together that will help address that? And so it's almost like we have to get researchers out of how do we make this new thing, give us more money to fund the work that we're already doing. I'm not suggesting we get rid of the tri-councils. I'm suggesting that a new organization needs to come to the table with some innovative approaches and a new way of thinking about what research is for in the country.
Well, thank you for that. And I know that I represent a region that's served by North Island College, and I know that they are extremely innovative and very responsive to community development, to economic development, to businesses, to Indigenous communities as they take steps forward. And that innovation, to work with them is really what makes them so useful. So I'm just wondering, when we look at this format, what do you think that they need to understand to make decisions that are more connected to what's happening on the ground of communities?
You know, the ambition of Capstone has been about solving big challenges. It's been about interdisciplinary research. It's been about mission-driven. And the difficulty is, if we're going to take advice from the same people who would like to see more money for the disciplinary research of the type undertaken by the tri-councils. This will not be new, and it will not be different. It will be the same thing under a different name, and I think that that's a missed opportunity.
Thank you.
And thank you to our witnesses, Dr. Shane, Sarah Watts-Renard, and Christian Bobley, for your testimonies and participation in the committee study. If you have any questions, you can direct them to the clerk. You may also submit additional information through the clerk. We're going to suspend briefly now to allow the first panel to leave, and we'll resume with the second panel. Thank you again. by video conference. Click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. It's now my pleasure to welcome from ACFAS, Association Francophone pour la Savoir, Martin Maltez, President by video conference, and Sophie Montrell, Executive Director, also by video conference. And here in the room with us, we have Canadian Brain Research Strategy, Dr. Jenny Young, Executive Director, and from the Federation for the Humanities and Social Sciences, Karine Morin, President and Chief Executive Officer. Welcome to all of you. Up to 5 minutes will be given to each of you for opening remarks, after which we'll proceed with rounds of questions. Actually, the two of you get to share this. Mr. Maltez and Ms. Montrell, I invite you to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I am the chair of the FAS at the University of Rimouski, and I'm accompanied by Sophie, who is the regional director. Madame Montré has been so for a long. It is something. It is a prosperity that of the country that we are very important. It is important to us. We have made an outstanding contribution to the transmission of knowledge and to the advancement of French-speaking scientific research in our community. We have 6 regional offices across Canada, and we have been able to promote the French language research in our areas. The mobilization of knowledge across Canada is of great import to us. I would like to begin by pointing out that on July 17, we submitted an official brief in response to a report but that was brought forward by the Government of Canada. We were concerned about the report and what it contained. Of some 10,000 words, only some 800 words were in French. The 180 words that were in French in this long report indicates the concern that was given to the French language. The time has come now to correct this injustice. And the tripartite councils will have to look into this. For AGFA, it is something that we feel is not an excuse for refusing research in French. The government will have to do something to remedy the decline of French, which is one of the 2 official languages in Canada. It is the responsibility of the government. The capstone is very important in terms of the funding of research. There has to be real equality between scientific research communities in English and French. Heritage Canada, some 10 days after the publication of the report, said that the Government of Canada is committed to improving research in French in Canada. There is, therefore, a new group, the Capstone Organization for Research, which would become a very strong entity in the carrying out of that research. The advisory committee has just begun its work, but we give a word of warning to the government that it will have to take very strong measures to ensure that research is done in French. If it is not the case, that would be unacceptable. The new Official Languages Act that came into force last June deals with the state of bilingualism in our country. And French is in decline in Canada, in North America. The new act in Part 7 requires federal bodies to see to the creation of information in French in all disciplines. This capstone organization must keep an eye on that, but the consultations that have to be done when we talk about positive measures have already finished. Research in French represents a challenge, and I repeat, nonetheless, much must be done to meet the statement that was contained in the new act. Thank you.
So is that the end for both of you? You still have a minute left? Okay. Thank you very much for your opening statement. We will now turn to Dr. Young. You have the floor for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm genuinely grateful to address this committee today. I recognize the level of dedication each of you brings to this work. The effort you're investing here to ensure that Canada's research dollars have the greatest possible impact mirrors what we in the research community strives for. I'm here today as the Executive Director of the Canadian Brain Research Strategy, or CBRS. CBRS is a pan-Canadian coalition representing 40 neuroscience and mental health institutes research programs, along with clinicians, patient partners, Indigenous partners, health charities, research funders, and industry partners. And together, we're united by a common goal, advancing brain health for Canadians through collaborative and impactful research. Investing in brain research is essential for Canada. 1 in 5 Canadians lives with a brain condition, whether it's dementia, mental illness, brain injury, or addiction. Every one of us knows someone who's impacted by one of these conditions, and we all have brains that we want to keep functioning at their best. We know the impact of brain health goes far beyond the individual. Brain conditions affect our healthcare system, economy, workforce productivity, and social structures, and this impact will only intensify as our population ages. Addressing these complex issues requires sustained research investment like that announced in Budget 2024 and a coordinated national approach. It's truly an exciting time, excuse me, with the historic investments in science and research that were announced in Budget 2024. Now, as we work to catch up with our G7 peers, it's essential that we think about how to invest more strategically and build together toward a more cohesive research ecosystem. So one of the Capstone's foundational aims is to support multidisciplinary research, which is essential as the scientific landscape evolves and challenges grow more complex. This focus is especially crucial in a frontier field like brain and mental health research, where its intersection with artificial intelligence puts it somewhere between CIHR and NSERC. And in the importance of psychology and other social sciences, it means that brain research often falls outside the mandates of our existing funding agencies. And this challenge illustrates why we need an overarching organization like the Capstone to bridge gaps and ensure that no field, particularly complex ones like brain research, is left without sufficient support. Our proposed National Brain Research Strategy offers a model for how we might think about the benefits of the Capstone. We've established a framework that enables collaboration among diverse academic disciplines and, crucially, connects basic research, clinical applications, and pathways to commercialization. By leveraging the Capstone's potential, we can ensure that research discoveries are effectively translated into practical solutions and improved health and economic outcomes for Canadians. These types of frameworks thrive when they are mission-driven yet still expert-informed, a balance that is essential if we're to achieve Capstone's vision of a strategically unified and impactful research ecosystem. Research priorities and funding decisions are most effective when grounded in the specialized knowledge that experts bring to their fields. Our own proposed national strategy at CBRS was developed with this principle in mind, representing neuroscience and mental health research programs big and small across the country, but also recognizing the expertise that patients and patient organizations, Indigenous knowledge holders, funding organizations, health charities, and industry bring. This expert-based foundation not only strengthens the quality and relevance of our work, but also aligns our projects with the real-world needs of Canadians. As we move forward, it's vital that Capstone's decision-making is guided by experts, even as we work toward larger mission-driven goals. In closing, I want to emphasize the great potential the Capstone holds to reshape Canada's research environment into one that is more collaborative, inclusive, and strategically aligned. By bridging existing gaps and supporting multidisciplinary research, the capstone can amplify the strengths we already have within Canada's scientific community. And with expert-driven guidance, we can ensure that the national strategy is responsive to the most pressing challenges facing our society. As we work to modernize research funding structures to keep pace with the evolving demands of research itself, ongoing opportunities for collaboration and conversation like those provided by this committee are essential. The Capstone Initiative is a step towards building the efficient, cohesive support structures our researchers need, and it will require everyone, all of us, working together for this vision to succeed. So thank you again for this opportunity to contribute to this national conversation, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Now, Ms. Morin, the floor is yours for an opening statement of up to 5 minutes.
Bonjour, chers membres. Thank you, members of the committee. I'm Karine Morin. I am the president and CEO of Fédération for the Humanities and Social Sciences. We are very interested in this capstone undertaking, and we thank you for inviting us here today.
Social Sciences is the national voice for disciplines dedicated to the advancement of an inclusive, democratic, and prosperous society. Our membership includes 76 post-secondary institutions and 80 scholarly associations, together representing a diverse community of more than 90,000 researchers and graduate students across the country. The Federation mobilizes new knowledge by supporting researchers across disciplines to inform and inspire policy and action in community, in institutions, and across society. The Federation fully supports bringing strategic focus and coordination to Canada's research system while preserving those features that have led to Canada's strong record of research excellence. The new capstone organization must build upon the foundational strength of the federal granting councils, respecting the current structure and funding levels that support the advancement of investigator-driven research and talent development in humanities and social sciences.
But to do so, we have 3 recommendations. First of all, to ensure the sustainability of the federal investment in the humanities and social sciences. The capstone, through its mission-oriented research, has to face up to a number of challenges that we are facing here in Canada, all of which deal with the human being. There is a great proportion of the research we feel should be carried out by researchers in the humanities and social sciences. Capstone should integrate Indigenous research, equality, diversity and inclusion, and decolonization. And 3, it should be inclusive and bring in together many disciplines.
About each of these 3 points. First, the capstone's definitions of mission-driven research, innovation, and impact must be inclusive of all disciplines and account for the inherent differences between natural sciences, engineering, health sciences, social sciences, and humanities. Addressing diverse challenges facing our democracy, our prosperity, our environment, and our humanity demands insights across all fields. It'll be critical that new funding opportunities be conceived not only as scientific and technological solutions, but human-centered ones that fully consider ethical, environmental, legal, social considerations alongside economic ones. Second, support for Indigenous research and for broader principles of equity, diversity, inclusion, and decolonization must be embedded within the capstone. Continuous consultation and partnerships with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis scholars and their communities are vital. We strongly recommend that the capstone build upon the important progress made by the federal granting councils on advancing Indigenous research, increasing equitable access to funding opportunities, promoting inclusive excellence, and providing necessary guidance and support to institutions in all of these aspects, including through the Dimensions program. Finally, it's critical that the governance of the capstone be diverse with representatives from across different sectors and disciplines, reflective of Canada's own diversity. the granting councils remain best positioned to address the distinct disciplinary needs and strength of Canada's research communities, and the capstone must build upon these foundations. Pour conclure, l'intégration.
To conclude, the integration of the humanities and social sciences perspectives will be essential for Capstone and its financing so as to improve the life of all Canadians. We are very happy to dialogue with the federal government as Capstone continues its evolution. Thank you for your attention, and we will answer any question you may have.
Thank you for those opening statements. We'll now open the floor for questions. Please be sure to indicate to whom your questions are directed. We'll start the 6-minute round with MP Kitchen for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all for being here today. It's greatly appreciated, and with the witnesses that we had prior, it's so great to continually learn and see so many different aspects. Hearing your presentations, and Ms. Moran, your comment, I think, is great, because you talk about in what I would describe as many disciplines and what we need to have. And a lot of times when we talk research, I think the average Canadian would go, oh, well, that's just health sciences or it's natural sciences. Whereas we need to also incorporate the humanities and social sciences as part of that, and oftentimes that gets broken down. And when we have witnesses coming here, everyone's got their own priority. That's what's important to them, because that's where their area of expertise is. And I will point out that for me, the Canadian Brain Research Strategy is actually very important to me, because as a 16-year-old, I was the victim of a hit and run by a drunk driver, and I had brain matter draining out my left ear. So I've had a lot of issues that I've had to deal with from brain. So I would like to see, personally, a lot of the research going to in that avenue. That's a personal issue of mine. But those are important things as we move forward. Ultimately, we've got universities, we've got colleges, we've got organizations, we've got businesses. How do we, I mean, Capstone is going to be an organization that's going to be a bureaucracy. It's not going to be money that's going to give funding to the brain research such that they can study more issues of dealing with CTE or whatever the issue may be. They're not going to get that extra money. The money is going to be creating a bureaucracy. And I'm just wondering your thoughts on how do we take that money, instead of creating a bureaucracy, and take the Tri-Council to do the job, which is doing that appropriate accountability, accreditation, making sure that they're doing what they should be doing.
Thank you for that question, and thank you for your appreciation that indeed there are many different research priorities, and it really is difficult to pick what is the top or even the many important priorities. But I think what we understand of Capstone is, in fact, that beyond what the current granting councils do on a disciplinary front is to bring about that mission-driven research that addresses greater complexity than might be addressed in otherwise a discipline-focused research project. So these missions to be defined, and this is where we emphasize that it's important that we not just think of scientific, technological moonshot missions, but that we look at the complexity of problems that we're facing. And these are often not to be addressed exclusively or even primarily by scientific or technological solutions. I like to give the example of the pandemic and how within the first year there was a vaccine. Those scientists, those biomedical scientists did their job extremely, remarkably fast and effectively. The pandemic persisted. There was more to it than a scientific technological solution. The whole complexity of deployment within our healthcare systems, across different populations, across the different provinces. There was much more to the pandemic across the world than that vaccine. The example would also come from the climate science. Our climate scientists have told us the challenges. What needs to happen now are many more changes from behavioral perspectives, individuals, communities, municipalities, the different scales. And
thank you,
that's where social
I
sciences can come
don't mean to interrupt you,
mission.
but I've got such short time, and I appreciate your comments. I think that's very important, especially when we look at, however, I mean, you did touch on a part where you talked about during COVID, and that was tremendous which our researchers did and our virologists, et cetera, did in coming up with the vaccines. Fantastic. And we continue to see we need to keep doing that. The problem with that is government didn't do the job it was supposed to do. And government the Public Health Agency of Canada it wasn't proactive, it was reactive. When the whole purpose of the PHC was to be proactive and be doing those situations. But that's another debate. So Dr. Young, I appreciate you receiving your Canadian, you basically put out a presentation earlier that I received on the capstone consultation submission that you made. And I really do appreciate it. There are a couple of points in here that I think are interesting. In point number 2, when you talk about the autonomy of granting councils, you said each council should retain autonomy to cultivate a diverse and adaptable research portfolio. And I wondering if you could expand upon that. To me, what I'm hearing there is each of the tri-councils should be doing their job, which is looking on the avenue of where we provide the research funding.
I think that to determine the specific areas of research funding, again, it's really from the peers. It's not just the leader of that specific council. You know, the importance of peer review and having that scientific advisory body that has been proposed, I think that's really important as well. And what I was really trying to emphasize there is that we do need each of those granting councils to do their specialized work in those fields, as my colleague Corinne just mentioned. And what we need, though, is to bring those efforts together, and that requires coordination. I think too long we've been just expecting it to happen naturally, and scientists are not trained to do that. There's no support to actually enable that to happen, and that's what we're hoping the capstone will do.
Thank you. I'm out of time? Oh, okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we'll turn to MP Longfield for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I'm going to start off my questions with Dr. Young. It's great to see you again. Tremendous work going on with the Canadian Brain Research Strategy. It's doing some work that's very parallel or similar to what Capstone is doing in terms of bringing researchers together from across Canada. But the Capstone would go a little deeper into other areas. One that I'm thinking of, I was at a lab at the University of Guelph this morning that was studying fish. They've just received some federal funding, $1.5 million over 2.5 years to look at Pacific salmon and the effects of bitumen on salmon. But also while I was in the lab, I saw them looking at the brains of deep water fish that had a way of regenerating themselves when they were damaged, and taking the research from these deep water fish, converting it into some stem cell research that could possibly find its way into medical applications. We don't know where some of the research goes, but going from fish to humans, or looking at the effects, the cultural effects of the loss of salmon on the Indigenous communities. Could you talk about the interrelationships that could be bridged through the capstone?
Thank you. I appreciate the member's question, Madam Chair. I think that you're absolutely right. We don't know where the research will go, and to really understand and to build those interrelations, we need a structure in place. And I think that part of what you're saying about how it will go deeper than just what the strategy we've built, it's because we need to bring that knowledge into practical application, and it needs to be a continuous cycle. It's no longer, the traditional model where you have discovery and then it gets applied. To have this happen a lot faster, especially in this rapidly this field and just how much faster research happens now, we need structure and infrastructure and training in place to make that happen.
I can just imagine with that structure in place, the work you've already done over the last few years at the Canadian Brain Strategy would be accelerated as well.
Absolutely, because right now we've been able to bring all of these different stakeholders, including, and from innovation and entrepreneurship and industry together in all of these different fields, but we need support to make our ideas happen, to implement the strategy.
Yeah. Great, thanks. And particular thanks for the work you're doing with Parkinson Canada and Brain Canada on neurodegenerative disease. 35 people a day being diagnosed every day with Parkinson's and then ALS and on. So it's crisis management as well. But thank you. I want to turn my attention over to Ms. Moran on the social sciences. Some of the research going on around the brain also includes the socialization that sometimes is affected by brain disease. Things like studying mime. The University of Guelph is doing studies on mime. Why would you want to do that? Well, mime helps motor control when people have loss of control. Studying things like yoga, of relaxation and what happens in terms of trying to manage the stress of medical diseases. The importance of social sciences in terms of capstone. Could you drill into that just a little bit more for us? Because it really does go across disciplines.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, when we think of the social sciences and humanities, we like to think of the importance that is required to research people, cultures, institutions, social relations. You also heard from Chad Gaffield at the start of this study, and he likes to simplify it by saying it's the study of human thought and human behavior. What were they thinking? Why did they do that? Now, we can go about asking ourselves those questions on a daily basis, and we come up with quick answers to be able to move on. But when these researchers dig deep into these issues, they do so with rigor in their methods, so that even though they may take non-obvious topics, in a way to hone those skills of finding the right documents that are going to be pertinent, or if you're doing qualitative study, talking to the right people who are going to be representative of the issue, or if you're doing a survey quantitatively, making sure you're asking those right questions. So as much as you may have a very precise and complicated and perhaps non-obvious research questions, the skills, and certainly through the graduate students involved in the research, the skill sets become really relevant. So in the context of mission-driven research, I think I've just highlighted what will be important. What is the mission looking at? What is the information it will look at? Who will be those who will be engaged in that mission research? And what will be the questions asked? So in a way, the framing of mission-driven research should come from a social science humanity framing in many instances. Not at all, but in many instances, there is a leading role, I believe, for social sciences humanities research to take on in some of the pressing problems that we're trying to tackle, or even the emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and that interface with humanity. So those are some examples.
Absolutely. Or the U.S. election. There's a lot of misunderstanding of what happened, how it happened, and we'll be peeling through that for a number of years to come. Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you. Probably solving that is beyond the scope of this committee, but interesting, yes. Okay, so now we'll turn to MP Blanchard-Jocat for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Malte, AGFAS sees a role for itself in the development of capstone with the development of different types of research. Can you expand on that? I will let Sophie Montré answer the question. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. We answered the consultation that was launched in June last by the Tripartite Council, and we sent a brief that answered the questions that they were asking on education. So what we are presenting to you today is somewhat different from, in terms of details, from what you will find in the brief that we tabled in the summertime. But on October 17, there was a report from the consultation, what we heard, and it was quite clear that most of the community was in agreement with the Capstone organization. There were a variety of briefs and evidence was given. They brought out specific elements, though, factors that would have to be watched closely in terms of the dissemination of information by the tripartite council. They have been mentioned in today's discussions and in previous discussions as well. Our role, well, that's quite, thank you very much. Mr. Malte, I'll move on to you. There was an external consultative group, an advisory group that was created, $8.5 million over 5 years. We all know that French is in decline. Do you think that that amount of money will suffice to correct that situation? I can tell you we are certainly happy that this action was taken, but we already see the need to go further. I think it's very important for colleagues throughout the country that they understand that it's 22 to 23% of the population of Canada that is French-speaking. And to have an equivalent standard of living in French means that you will have to have similar structures with the Anglophone community throughout the country. This is a very important issue because to perform correctly, Francophones in this country have to expend 30 to 40% more energy if they find them than those who find themselves in an Anglophone situation have to do. So if you want to have a more significant life in French research, this has to be taken into consideration. And if you want to have a French language research life that is more significant, I can tell you that it would open new horizons for Canada on the international level. It could be taken into consideration by the Government of Canada. That research can play an important role. It should be taken into consideration by the funding agencies as well, because those agencies should reflect on how the French language research could be integrated. Mr. Malte, there are structural disparities in terms of postgraduate education, further education for Francophones in Canada. There is an underfunding of Francophone institutes throughout Canada, in Quebec, as well as in the areas where Francophones live outside of Quebec. Over the past 20 years, there has been an underfunding of the universities in this way. So what do you have to say to that? Well, if you're speaking about Francophone institutions throughout Canada and the funding of those institutions, there are very clear obligations on the part of the federal government with respect to research. Measures have been proposed over the past months about the reports that have come out. Sophie, would you like to add to that?
J'ajouterais très rapidement que
Yes. In the briefs that were submitted, in all areas of research, there are insufficiencies with respect to scientific research in French. We have documented everything, but what you have to avoid in the creation of Capstone is you have to avoid going back to square one and recreating what exists already. There is an obligation in Part 7 of the Official Languages Act to have all departments and organizations bring in proactive measures to provide for the preservation of French. That has to be done at the right time. But here we've had at least a minimum of 2 years of consultation, Mr. Blanquet, Jean-Claude Blanchette. Yes. You're saying, Madame, that it is well documented.
So now we will turn to MP Blaney for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to ask my first question of Dr. Young. In your response to consultations, you said, quote, the unique mandates, independent decision-making processes, and funding priorities align with specific research domains of each granting council, including CIHR's institute model, must be preserved. How do you balance this need for autonomy with Capstone's coordinating role?
I think it's really perfect to be able to find that balance, because we do need to focus our investment on some of the really big problems that requires all these different disciplines to work together. We can't just expect it to happen naturally. And so, and we need to work with government and to understand what are the pressing issues impacting Canadians today, and then work together and bring everybody's efforts together to do that. And again, that requires support, it requires infrastructure and personnel and people and training for people to do that.
Well, thank you for that. And I often make a joke in my constituency about we need a ministry of connection. And I see the same sort of idea where it's like things are happening and they're not talking to each other, but they relate to one another. And there's no sort of focus or coordination that allows those things to come together in a beautiful way to really create solutions. And so it's like that connection part is really missing. And I know that you talk a lot about bringing the linkages between basic research, clinical research, and research commercialization for stronger health and economic outcomes. And we know that we heard from the last people testifying around the importance of working with industry. But we've seen what's happened in some cases when the relationship between science and industry becomes a little too close. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how do we balance out all of these multiple needs and make sure that there's a clear accountability as we're moving forward in these kind of programs and methods.
I apologize, I didn't understand what you meant by science and industry being too close.
Well, I'm just thinking of SDTC. I'm sorry, my mind's a little bit connected with what's happening in the media as well as here in the House. But I think that's an important sort of warning sign of things happening and it falls apart, and then all the good work that's happening dissipates because there isn't clear sort of processes about the guidelines and how they work. And I just, as I see this moving forward and I hear what the other folks that were testifying and what you're testifying about, that sort of bringing things together so that it's actually a practical application. As a representative from rural communities, I know that key working with industry locally really can make solutions. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how do you balance out all of these needs, and how would Capstone be able to do that? What kind of methods would they need to put in place?
So even though everybody is operating on a different level, whether it's industry, whether it's basic research, there are shared needs that if we met them would really benefit the entire research process, from basic fundamental to clinical to entrepreneurship and innovation. And some of the common needs are, for example, the fact that we have...
I'm sorry, can we just keep the side conversation down? It's making it a bit difficult to hear. Yes, please. Please keep the conversation down because it's making it difficult for others to hear.
So
thank you.
Some of the shared needs are the fact that in Canada we have this incredibly unique culture of collaboration, and we want to share our resources, we want to share the data. And what we've heard from our consultations with stakeholders in all of these different fields is that we need to bring this data together. And when you have data on research, data on clinical research, all different fields and sectors can access it. and they can benefit and use that data, and it also makes them work together because they're all working on the same data. And so that is something where it cannot be supported by grant funding alone. It is something that complements and amplifies the impact of the grants that we're funding. And there's currently no mechanism in Canada to support things like that. And my understanding of the capstone is that it's really supposed to do something extra on top and to fill those gaps and to provide that stability that we do not have because we don't have, you know, the number of people and the base that the United States have, but we do have that really unique superpower of being able to collaborate, and it requires infrastructure and resources to support it.
Dr. Byrne, I was wondering if you wanted to add to that.
Well, I would add that the current funding councils do have strong mechanisms of accountability, and there are funding opportunities that currently exist within the councils to facilitate exchange between science and industry, or even science and the not-for-profit. Sadly, something fraudulent or inappropriate could happen in any sector. So the importance of having the accountability, the transparency of those grants, of the grants flowing through typically academic institutions, those mechanisms exist, and we would hope that those mechanisms would indeed be adopted and enhanced by a capstone, and so that there would be the sort of best assurances that the investments are flowing in the ways that they're expected to.
Thank you. So now we'll turn to MP Tucker for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. It's the capstone, or the need for a capstone-like structure is bearing out with some of the testimony on some of the problems we have in Canada with funding of research. Earlier we've talked about some questionable studies from humanities and social studies that have been getting federal tax dollars, but we know there are issues with STEM studies as well. And I'm talking about the replication crisis, in which the results of many scientific studies, particularly in health and psychology, has been discovered to be impossible to reproduce, which is kind of concerning on the dollars going to studies that we can't reproduce afterwards. And it's getting a fair bit of attention. And just could you tell the committee more about this replication crisis for scientific literature and how Capstone might be able to assist in resolving that? Either witness.
I could go first.
Okay.
So you're right, it is a concern, and it's a concern for scientists too. And again, what we can build on is the fact that scientists want to share. They want to share their data, they want to share their methodologies. A lot of times it's because the structure isn't there to enable them to do that. And so sometimes experiments can be difficult to replicate because you can't find all of the details of how the person did it. It's not that they don't want to share, it's not that it wasn't done properly, but there's a nuance and that needs to be there. And by making the data available, and again, we have an amazing culture in Canada versus the US, where I worked for 14 years, where we actually want to share everything and be very transparent. There's just no infrastructure and support for that kind of collaboration. And that's what we're hoping the capstone would have the potential to do, is to bring together all these efforts.
Just to clarify, you said that Canadians researchers want to share, but now you're saying that we can't reproduce some of those results because researchers aren't sharing additional information?
No, I think, thank you for letting me clarify that. They're not able to, there's no full structure for it. It takes people and skills, these are technically skilled positions, to upload data, to do the analysis, that kind of thing. And our grants in Canada are too small to support those kind of technical positions. There's no repository for you to share all of your work. And so it's that, again, these kinds of things take resources and infrastructure, and we just don't have that level of funding with grants alone in Canada.
And you're right that could be on some of the studies, but it's wider spread than that. And there is studies on studies. And the one that I was able to find that is kind of relevant is Why Most Published Research Findings Are False by John P.A. Lomenis. I'm not sure if you've seen or know of this study, but it looks at thoroughly, even with the data, there's a lot of research that gets done that we can't replicate it. And there's issues there, and I'm not sure how Capstone would correct it, but I'll let the other witness comment on this issue if you have some other comments on it.
I think another matter that attracts attention is that pressure of publish or perish, and that sentiment that every time you undertake a study, you better put out something because your grant, the next grant, depends on demonstrating that whatever prior investment you had resulted in findings that got published. And so that pressure does seem to now lead to some scientists not quite doing the rigorous work of data analysis, and the publications that result are not as sound as they should be, and that gets uncovered with time. But that said, in a context of a mission-driven agency, I do hope that there would be some expectations of transparency in the research that would sort of prevent those happenings of cutting corners, of not doing the full analysis, of not making the data ultimately available through infrastructure for data repositories, so that we would not find ourselves with such problems of research findings that are not replicable.
I only have 30 seconds left, and this is going to have to be a written response, but in the just switching gears a little bit, in the Canadian Brain Research Strategies recommendation, Ms. Young, that they state that recommend that President of Capstone possess a strong scientific background to ensure alignment of Capstone programming with the scientific capabilities of the ecosystem, end quote. That's from the report. Would that mean that no one from SHRC's side of things could hold that job, or would it just exclude the humanities side of the equation?
For giving me the opportunity to clarify. We see that all as science, and so it absolutely includes it. Especially for a field like the brain, it is so complex. And if I could go back a little bit to your other question, another issue of the reproducibility is just that the brain is so complex. You know, some of the earlier clinical trials, they failed because we realized there were these other factors that needed to be taken into account that we didn't realize. And so as we could collect more data, as we get to understand it, we say, oh, this is why it didn't work before, and we can refine it with further study.
Just, are you concerned? Okay.
Okay, but that was important, that clarification. Okay, so MP Jacek, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony. I actually would like to follow up a little bit on Mr. Tucker's questions. Dr. Young, in your recommendations, you're suggesting an independent board of directors for the Capstone structure itself. We heard some really persuasive testimony in the first panel today in terms of applied research, the role of polytechnics, and I was just wondering, Dr. Young, if you could elaborate on who you would like to see on that independent board of directors, and do you agree that there's a strong role for applied research?
Thank you for that question. I think that to go back to that independent board of directors, this was a recommendation from the Bouchard report and the Naylor report, so I take zero credit for that. But I really appreciate your question, because I think too often we look at it as basic versus applied. And that is simply not the case now. It's kind of outdated in today's era of rapid discovery. Instead, it's really a dynamic, non-linear cycle where you're continuously informing and driving each other. And that means that we need the people with the applied knowledge. These are data specialists. These are the people who know how to run an MRI machine. These are technical positions that are trained at colleges, at NAIT, for example, in Edmonton, where I was. So we need these jobs, and we need them to be working together. And that's why funding science and research, especially with these kind of infrastructure personnel jobs, it's not just about discovery versus applied or basic versus applied.
Thank you. Now, it may astonish my Conservative colleagues, but I think I personally would be very averse to see some large bureaucracy required for this capstone agency. I am assuming that this board of directors will be very familiar with what the tri-councils are doing. They would have full access to the research funding allocations that each of the tri-councils is making, and could therefore ask those tri-councils to allow some of their research to be used in coordination across the tri-councils. And this might, in fact, save some funding, potentially, because presumably a lot of the research currently being done in the tri-councils would be very useful for these mission-driven projects. Am I correct in surmising that?
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. And again, I think people think it just would happen naturally, but there needs to be that support, the overarching structure to bring it together. In an analogous way with our national strategy for brain research, we fully support a national dementia strategy and autism strategy, and now the proposed strategy on brain injuries, because they know the specifics of those fields and what is unique to the needs of those fields, but then we can provide the overarching support that would enable all of this research to come together in a way that's bigger than the sum of its parts.
Ms. Morin, I noticed in your bio that you, in fact, worked at Genome Canada. One of the things that I'm intrigued with is, obviously, Genome Canada provides funding for research. Would you see it an advantage to, in fact, incorporate not only the tri-councils, but potentially Genome Canada? We heard earlier from the first panel about tax. Are there other agencies that could, in fact, contribute to these mission-driven projects?
Thank you for that question. I think that what we see across the ecosystem is that different organizations have been able to pilot different modalities of research or different modalities of funding the research. So my familiarity with Genome Canada, I can absolutely attest to a lot of wonderful things that organization has been able to do. My favorite example is that the genomics science research was advancing with an integrated component that looked at the social sciences and humanities components. The GELS program is what it was known as, and the acronym stood for genomics, and it's environmental, economic, ethical, legal, social aspects. So that integration of social sciences and humanities into genomic science is an idea that I'm carrying forward here to say mission-driven research should have that sort of integration and or interdisciplinary and or at times the lead from social sciences and humanities. If a Genome Canada didn't exist and we only relied on what the 3 granting councils have done in their regular funding opportunities, we would not have seen the benefits of that modality. So there is, I believe, a risk in bringing everything into the fold, but there's nothing that prevents right now the 3 funding agencies and or a capstone to also look at some genomics related questions. So I think it is a difficult choice to be made, but I would prevent us of not considering that there are ways of piloting funding modalities that are really essential in learning, but I hope that those great ideas get pulled into the capstone.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now we will turn to MP Blanchet-Jocas for 2.5 minutes, please.
Ma question pour monsieur.
My question is for Mr. Malte. In the organization of the funding for research, what would guarantee the active participation for francophones? Should the funding not reflect the specific needs of francophonie?
You're on mute, sir.
Martin, ton micro est fermé.
Your microphone is closed, Martin. I don't know if I can answer the question directly, but first of all, one of the questions was asked with respect to the key principles that should guide decision-making with respect to the design, the conception, and then the implementation Well, you have to understand that we at the base represent multidisciplinary researchers in all domains. We promote all sciences and organizations throughout Canada. We're the largest organization in the world promoting science that is done in French. So we represent individuals. We consult them. We make our decisions. A linguistic, institutional fairness with respect to data and consultation on the needs. Thank you. With respect to representativity, what role should your organization play? Because you are very important for the diffusion, the creation of research in French. What role would you like to play in the creation of this new committee that is to disseminate research in French and information in French? Excellent question. I think that we are a long-standing, we need a long-standing, serious, well-documented spokesperson, and that is us. We represent communities throughout Canada. There are at least 65,000 researchers who speak French in Canada. 30,000 are in the rest of the country from east to west, not just in Quebec. So it's on their behalf that we speak to the government and its various entities. The least thing that we can ask the government is to take into account the recommendations that we have proposed over the past months, as I have said, that are very, very much linked to the creation of Capstone, and to continue to see us as people who represent a very useful community for Canada in both languages, in both international scientific networks, and there are not many countries that can do that.
Okay. So we'll now turn to MP Blaney for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I'm glad I don't have your job. It's hard to stop people who are sharing really important information. I'm going to ask Dr. Marin and Dr. Young the same question, and I mean, I think this goes back to the earlier conversation that you were having about the makeup of the board. And as I was contemplating this, and I am new to this committee, so I'm not as saturated in this information, so I am hoping to piece this together fairly concisely. But I think, you know, I guess I just have reflection. I know that diverse boards often do the best work because they bring together more complex, differing ideas, and then if you take the time to get there at the other end, you often have the best solution because you've looked at it from so many different angles. And I'm just wondering, in terms of the board, what kind of representation do you expect to be part of that? And is it just the research academic community, or do you want other sort of reference points that speak more broadly to the experience of Canada? So I'll start with you first, Dr. Marin, and then move to you, Dr. Young.
Thank you for that question. I think we've placed a lot of emphasis on the disciplinary diversity that would make up that board, but I think you're right that we would also want to look at sectoral diversity. However, I think it can be challenging for people who are not at all familiar with the academic research world to be able to readily contribute to that thinking. So I think there is some who are outside of academia but that are still familiar with it that would have ease of exchanging with those peers. So I think there is definitely diversity, as you say, of the disciplines, the sectors, individual diversity as well. But to facilitate the exchanges, I think familiarity will still be critical.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that I agree that it should be a very diverse board, and I can speak to how we built our national strategy. So not just based on the heads of all these directors and directors of institutes, but also with early career researchers, so a diversity of where they are in their career stage. But also for us, Indigenous knowledges and Indigenous ways of knowing is very central to what we're doing, and that's because we're really aiming to look at the brain more holistically. And because we understand that we cannot just look at molecules or even just at brain networks or something, we really need to look beyond that into other connection with the community, connection with other people, and broadly speaking, across all of the distinct Indigenous nations we have in our country, they look at brain health and health much more holistically, and it's like the scientists are just catching on now. And so there's absolutely value there. When we spoke with patients, they often told us they do not have a brain condition that just fits into one silo or one description. Sorry.
Source is actually it's a minute or so over. So thank you so much to our witnesses. Our next committee meeting is Tuesday, November the 19th. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn our meeting? Yes? Meeting adjourned.